Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 57 of the Blowback Roundtable. We were expecting a fifth panelist. At the last minute, Leo, something came up, so we will definitely have him back some other time. But we've got a great panel lined up, and we have a lot to discuss. Of course, Ben is in Pech, Hungary. Ian is in a particular suburb of Moscow. Carlo is from DC, the belly of the beast. So today's episode is entitled Haroun Al-Amriki, and I am told that this is an honorific that the Yemenis have given him. I mean, most people are aware of what happened with that. It is very striking to me that, I haven't watched much news, but it really hasn't gotten a lot of coverage, which makes sense. Of course, if what happened was a, like some kind of a Russian protester in front of the Kremlin, did a similar protest, there's no doubt it would be wall to wall to wall, and everybody in the United States would know about it. It would be taught in schools.
Hero, martyr of the people.
Yeah.
If you got a blood clot in front of the Kremlin, you would be a hero.
Yeah. Good point. So that's that was my primary takeaway. Just an awful. I mean, I just feel so bad for him and his family. And I don't know. What do you guys have to say about that issue?
This is Aaron Bushnell we're talking about.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So 25-year-old Air Force captain did an extreme protest of self-immolation in front of the Israeli embassy in what city was that in? Is that in DC?
I think it's the DC Israel.
Yeah,
embassy,
let me just make it's on Reno Road, the Israeli embassy. And there's a cluster of embassies there. There's a dozen there: Nigeria, Jordan, Bangladesh, and Reno Road. Actually, it was on. I've taken that road hundreds of times, mostly to drive my daughter to school, and I'm just very familiar with the area. If you drive down Reno Road south, it's on the left-hand side, basically at the corner of Reno Road and Van Ness. If you're familiar with Washington, it's very accessible there. I just wanted to throw that in geographically. Other than that, I just want to hear what you guys have to say right now.
Well, I'm not sure about the location, but it looks, uptown central. But I had
it's not a real. The University of District of Columbia is down the road from it. It's a Tony area. Overall, every house, I don't care how small, is going to go for over $1 million. So anyway,
we'll show that there's different commemorations of Aaron or Haroun, which it's Arabian. It is the translation of Aaron, but it also it's an honorific that sort of means Jesus. I forgot, but it's a very like a high title. Anyway. I had some deep emotions. Like first, I've told you guys this before the stream, but I blew myself up once in a sort of kid accident with like a pile of wood that didn't really burn. So a friend of mine put a lot of petrol on it, like 3.5 liters worth. I don't know that in gallons, and I lit it with basically a hand lighter, and I flew like 3 meters. Explosion, 3rd-degree burns. Like my hands were in. The skin was stripped every few days, and I was on opioids until everything got half a year of school missed. Anyway, for a year, I dreaded the smell of petrol. I remember the pain is excruciating, and I watched this video and his first his act, and then the screams. It's very difficult, and I'm never going to watch it again. But it's the Free Palestine slogan that he tried even with his last breath to do. And first thing was the pain. The second is how one can be I don't know, so without hope to actually do this to a 25-year-old young body. And the second emotion I got was when the Israeli embassy guard, came out and pointed a fucking gun at him. We should know the name of that. He should live in infamy forever, that guy. So Aaron has passed away, and that's take over, guys. I'm not sure. You know.
Well, that's a typical DC policeman, unless I'm extremely mistaken, because they're usually who do the security for the embassies is the local PD. Carlo, correct me if I'm wrong. That's probably
I think that's right. I'm not certain though. I'm not certain. I will say that when I went to these, I worked with CISPAS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, and when we went to protest in, I was doing a television show, and including them in the show, their footage. When we went to protest on California Street in front of the Salvadoran embassy, it was the DC police that kept hauling me away from going up to the embassy door. I'm a little guy, and two big, starker police officers were fond of grabbing me by the elbows and carrying me out behind the picket line. And they never arrested me, but yeah, it was the DC police.
I'm familiar with the uniform, but it was black, nondescript, not a lot of badges. That's why I assumed he was with.
Probably PD is.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm certain they have, they can hire extra security too, and they do. I'm certain they do, especially, embassies with money and they feel they're at risk of some sort.
So I've seen videos of police in the Moscow embassies in Moscow, and it was always, the Moscow, the Russian police, and in Yerevan in Armenia, it was Armenian police there as well. I think that's probably universal. It's the local guys who have jurisdiction, but yes.
Let me make another point, because he made like a last tweet somewhere or some sort of social media post, and he cannot be party to a genocide committed by his country. It was very clear, and his last words were "Free Palestine" multiple times. And there was media coverage, but it was all about young airmen self-immolation in front of the embassy, and nothing about even I think the New York Times even went to, well, he was from a religious family and he's got an anarchist past, and here we go. It's probably going to be a political or mental illness thing, but they never mentioned his goals or why he did this. Like, that's masterful media coverage.
I think it's a good barometer for. I mean, it's not good, of course, but it's a barometer of feel what you said, Ben. Feelings of hopelessness, because we had that euphoric nationalism all after 9/11. Everybody was ready to go.
The opposite of that, right?
Right, and it's burned out. Millennials got very burned out because we were those fighting age people when 9/11 happened, and 20 years later now it's Gen Z that's the fighting age people, and I think people are very disillusioned. It's not at all like in 2003 when everybody, even when there were some warning bells going off in people's heads, but still we were doing the George Bush, how he'd always say, stay the course. Everybody was staying the course. I think we're beyond that now, and he's kind of the extreme edge of that, someone who feels so hopeless that he just needs to make this statement in self-immolation, which reminds me of those priests in Vietnam who would go.
Yeah, that's the most famous photo of the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Monks, yeah.
Allegedly, he was going to be deployed to Israel. I've heard that.
I haven't heard. I don't know if that's true.
That he was given orders in November. Yeah, I don't know if that's true either. But I heard that he was given orders in November that his unit was going to go and support, whatever. Well, as a pilot, it's quite plausible that he could be assigned to, help out with the logistics of supporting the genocide and ensuring that it has enough, weapons and things to continue. And that's. So I've heard that. I guess we can follow up on another show to see if that was in fact true. But that would make sense, right? Like, he had two choices to, fulfill his duty or, refuse to fulfill his duty. So I've heard that as a contrast that gives some context to, to his actions. but yeah, we'll have to verify that.
Yeah.
What about his background? I mean, I did hear also that he had a religious background, and yeah, and I saw your headline about the anarchist past. Does anybody have any?
Not much. There was a big anarchy symbol under his last social media message, but I don't think that matters too much. But I'd like to make the point of the difference between the Western media coverage, which we touched on, and then I send you guys the link of responses to his death from Yemeni people, auto-translated, mostly tweets, and it's just the most touching. So he will, his image will live forever. And by the way, yeah, Amriki or Al-Amriki is from America, and Haroun is Aaron, but it's also the honorific that means exalted or lofty. So that's how they treat him. They started calling him that, and apparently this is unverified, just from one person in Yemen, that they will carry his picture this Friday onto the latest Yemeni marches. So for them, it was everything in the world, even though it's a horrible thing. Huge difference, like a huge gap.
Carlo, any thoughts on?
It happens in Washington. There's a couple of things I recall. One, the gentleman, I can't remember his name, in the first Gulf War, I believe, drove. He commandeered an army vehicle and drove it onto the mall. And when he poked his head out of the vehicle, a sniper shot him in the head. And I think he was protesting the. Even though it's a flip side, Letelier and his aide, I can't remember her name, Miss Moffat, when they were blown up at Logan Circle, it was 2 blocks from where I was working. So we heard the explosion. And so these things occur in Washington on both sides of the aisle, with not a great deal of frequency, but sometimes. And I I just I just can't get over the fact that even though he's given this honorary title by the Yemenis, who are very courageous people, apparently, um, that that it's just not going to have any impact on the policymakers. They
No,
just turn a blind eye to it.
none.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what's horrible, isn't it? I can
yeah,
understand the hopelessness and despair of what he might have felt. We all watched this genocide for how many months now, since October, on our smartphones. It's ongoing, and not much we can do about it. My country is the one country that is vetoing a unified European ceasefire request. We are the worst Zionists, apparently, my government, and there is zero I can do about it. But imagine how many factors greater this hopelessness has to be to do something like that. I mean, yeah.
so it's heartfelt, but I mean I from everyone, but I just don't. These guys are so callous. They're so
Yeah,
beyond humanity.
yeah, no, that's part
Humanity.
of
They
this.
don't give a
The
shit.
saddest thing is his sacrifice. Isn't gonna affect. It's not gonna affect policy.
No.
Um,
I
They're
mean,
not
you
even.
know,
Biden, and this was after this event, he wasn't even talking about this or was questioned about this. I think Millie was, but he was like licking his mint fucking chocolate chip ice cream. And he mentioned, oh, I'm hoping for like a ceasefire deal maybe by next week, by Monday. Completely casual. Nothing has happened to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think they're trying to, with the ceasefire. They're just trying to prolong the situation, and to palliate the public, because there is a certain percentage of the public that's worked up about this. Oh, we're close to a ceasefire, so people like sit back and go, "Oh, we're going to have a ceasefire soon," which isn't
Yeah.
going to solve anything anyway.
No, no, absolutely not. I mean, I see some symmetry there between both situations, Gaza and Ukraine, except in Gaza, there's that horrible human toll. That's a very different. Women, children, massive losses.
Yeah.
Anyway, emotional start. Let's
Yeah.
so
try.
there's some good news. We've got the first destruction, the first recorded destruction of a M1A1 Abrams.
Yeah, just
We
to,
should've-
to, to understand how serious this is, there were numerous firsts yesterday, and I think Ian and I both kind of celebrated them. I mean, what do you call it? The French Caesar howitzer, the Swedish Archer, which was the first time, but it was only on Telegram channels, on Redovka, and places like that. But there was a big hunt underway. But the M1 Abrams made it way all the way to TASS from the very top brass, saying they're going to, like Peskov said, they'll, of course, they burn like everything else. The top brass confirmed the kill. There were high-res photos from the drone afterwards. So this was a really big thing on the Ukraine front. But take it away, Ian.
We should have screen captured Ian's Facebook post, but
Oh, you saw that.
yeah.
Yes. So, do we have any? Did you, Ben? Did you grab any pictures by chance of the post talking about the Abrams? And I think most of our audience has probably seen it, but for those who haven't,
Yours, I don't.
well, it doesn't have to be mine. It can be any photo.
I'll find the picture.
Yes, but so the big thing is that, I mean, well, one, it's not. I mean, all of the trolls and all of the pro-Ukraine people were for how. I mean, when did they even first promise the Abrams? I don't remember when was the exact start date. It was a while ago. It was like 18 months ago, and just like, oh, this is going to be a game changer. It's just gonna clean house. It's a Wunderwaffe, and then, but the thing is, it was entirely predictable that it was going to burn, because for one, what the Ukrainians are using is actually not the best model of Abrams. So the Saudis actually have their own, as part of their military contract with the USA, they have their own capabilities to produce and field Abrams. And of course, they're the newer A2 variants that the Saudis are using, and those burn. I mean, and they're fighting, the Houthi rebels. They're not fighting the conventional army. So this was not.
And they hid this for the longest time, like longer than the Challenger.
You're right. I mean, with Avdiivka, I'm sure some Abrams would have come in handy, but they withheld it from even that. So that was a very interesting decision. So the big thing is, we watched the video. I mean, I've heard theories on it, so it was 99% certain a drone or a loitering munition of some sort based on the video. And it looks like what had happened is it did hit. It's a similar strategy that worked with the Leopard, because it's the same 4-man crew, external storage configuration.
Manual
you have
reload.
that storage bustle. You have that storage bustle, and that does help crew survivability, because the blowout panels direct the blast out of the tank rather than into the crew compartment. The problem with it is that, and what they figured out with the Leopard, is that bustle can be penetrated, and you can set off the ammunition, basically scoring a mobility kill on the tank. I mean, the crew probably walked away, but the tank itself is done. And that's the best I could make it from that footage, that video that went out. So it's,
I mean,
How much does a tank cost the taxpayers?
I think like 8 to 10 million a piece, at least. It's not a cheap vehicle.
Tens of millions, probably.
Yes. And when you count everything that went into it, just bringing it to Ukraine is not easy. And the drone that
probably doubles the cost.
What's your
trade-off here?
I have old info. I remember something like 31 being sent. What's your info? How many does Ukraine have?
31 was the official
31.
number. Yes.
That's
so
what
basically, that's enough for those storm brigades that were leaked by the net Pentagon leak. And they're kind of a wonky configuration of artillery, mechanized infantry, MRAPs, and tanks. So it's not a tank heavy force. So the Abrams, they sent, is probably enough for one of those brigades. Though I don't think they're going to use, I think now that the offensive is over and there were no Abrams present for it, they're going to probably, I mean, this wasn't a spearhead of tanks. It was just one driving around by itself. That's probably how they're going to use it. They're going to spread them out rather than like what they did with the Bradleys and the Leopards, concentrating. That's probably what they're going to do, spread them out. The problem with the Avdiivka, and that was the thing with all those stories with Avdiivka, the Russians lost 50,000 men or 100,000 men or 1 million men taking Avdiivka. But that's pretty clearly not true, because if you take heavy losses, you have to stop and reset before you can press forward again. But they immediately continued advancing. And apparently, from the videos I saw, the Ukrainians did not have pre-prepared positions to fall back to. They were trying to dig them They were trying to dig them as they were getting hit.
I want to get to that too, but before anything else, I'm just thinking of the psychology. You know, Scholz and the Germans sending leopards and thinking that the Russians will maybe run away and get scared. They see the Balkenkreuz, you know, the ancient enemy's symbol on it, and they're going to get more angry. And of course, there were, what do you call it, bounties on that thing. And I think there was a 10 million ruble bounty on this thing as well.
Yes,
so
10
someone's
million.
From an actor. So someone's very excited now and getting a new flat, other than, of course, an Order of Courage or something like that. So it's fantastic that they thought that this would be like a psychological weapon on the one hand, you know.
Well, I mean, it raises a big question of
It
what
just
exactly,
pissed them off. So.
What the thinking was, because 31 tanks is not, I mean, 3,000 Abrams or even 300 Abrams would be a force. It would be enough for a large scale offensive. 30 is not enough for anything. It's just
But they're also getting 12 F-16 soon. So.
Oh yeah, that's going to win the war. I mean,
so
people
given
believe
my
it
understanding, they have to cannibalize some of the Abrams to make other ones actually serviceable. And Alexander McCoras also pointed out that 3 Patriot anti-missile systems have been destroyed in recent days.
They're hunting those and the NASAMs as well, another AD system.
Right. And also he said, or I read it somewhere, that the Russians are moving more troops out of Crimea into Zaporozhye. And I'm just speculating here. This is pure speculation. But this could be another push. This could be another push west toward Odessa, or at least toward the port city. I can't remember the name of it, above Odessa, to cut off Odessa. And of course, Moldova and Transnistria are back in the news. So
Zaporizhia is more east. Unless
it's a different front. So let's talk about this one first from Avdiivka.
Yeah, Zaporozhia is more east of Odessa, but still, it's if you're in western Zaporozhia, you're not a stone's throw, but fairly close to Odessa. There was a time when the Russians were actually had taken a city. I probably should have looked this up. On a little bit northeast of Odessa,
north of Kherson. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
I want us to steer us to what Ian was mentioning earlier, that there's no prepared lines. I mean, this whole thing in Avdiivka was incredibly fast. We were prepared for a Bakhmut meat grinder, months and months. Incredibly fast, they just captured it. And since then, the movement on the Ukrainian maps has been one village after the other, and the Russians confirming it and the Ukrainians confirming it. And then I saw a sergeant in the Ukrainian armed forces saying, there are no prepared defense lines from the west of here. I've seen people just in a hole they dug in the middle of the field, getting bombed with Russian, the first Russian drones that drop little grenades, whatever that one is. But
if we can just launder one more batch of aid, then we'll be happy. Let's just launder another 60 billion. And then they can lose the war. But let's not waste this opportunity. Let's launder, 60 more billion before we lose. Because if we just lose without laundering that last bit, that's not going to be as good for us.
We get on to Western solutions. Yeah.
Now, Ian, I don't want to take credit, but he brought out in his Facebook post about the Abrams the cost ratio. So he suggested that the munition that took out the Abrams was about $400. Whereas the Abrams itself is about 8 to 10 million. So that's a pretty good ratio, if you're looking at it from an economic standpoint, and it suggests that, Russia is doing very well if they can, maintain this kind of cost disparity. And then you guys said something else, too, that I wanted to bring up, but I forget what it was.
I'm going to add a little bit to the ZMPP, the Zaporozhye, back in the day, they were shelling it. And Rafael Grossi, in the last week, who was the International Atomic Agency head, said there's renewed attacks. Again, he didn't name from where, but, it's under Russian control. So it's not inconceivable that they're trying to do some sort of big, horrific event and blame it on Russia again. But there's nothing that could be the reason for the troop deployment that Carlo mentioned. This one.
And we shouldn't forget about
Yes.
the weather too, because Ukraine has had some, like, if you look at most of the photos and video, there's very little snow there. It's muddy. It's
We're
a
getting
much
into-
warmer winter. So it's, we have to look at when the spring right here, next few weeks, within the next month, it's possible you'll see a lot more movement. Maybe.
This
Yeah,
is
the
the
Ukraine-
second Rasputitsa right now.
Yes.
Yeah, the Ukrainians are trying to blow up the Zaporozhye power plant again. Their attempts to do that. I had something in mind, and it just escaped me. So go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
Well, concerning the lack of prepared defenses, the speculation is that the Russians are going to be able to, make some really large gains in the near future, and the weather, of course, would help that. With the mud, they're less likely to make those kinds of huge territorial gains because they're not as mobile. But so in the coming weeks, I don't know how long it takes for the mud to not be so muddy.
Well, I mean, the next big city is Kupiansk, I think, that they want to take, and they've already taken, so as Ben pointed out, some incremental villages. I did remember what I wanted to say is that Zelensky chimed in, and
Oh yeah.
he began with a 770,000 man army at the beginning of this, and he's only lost 31,000 men.
Yeah.
There was a lot of shit coming out of Zelensky in Kiev. Yeah, he's had some press briefings, and he looks pretty much, as you'd expect. But that 31,000 was amazing because in the same breath, he said, if we don't get the 60 billion within 1 month, billions from the US, then a lot of people are going to die. A lot of settlements are going to be lost, and it's just fantastic. In the one breath, he says that we are planning a new counter-offensive, but we're making different plans because the Russians have leaked. They know of our plans. And then his foreign minister Kuleba says the Russians may be launching a new offensive right as soon as May. It's just like absolute schizophrenia going on in Kiev, while we had some weekend visitors from Europe, as usual. The tourists were there. And I have my view on going from that all the way to the Paris Support Ukraine summit of what's going on here. But maybe you guys want to go first. I do want to hear the untarnished opinions first. It was fantastic. And let me know if you want to watch some Zelensky.
Well, I just wanted to also add that the CIA has been definitively exposed.
That's another big topic.
New York Times article.
Yes, the New York Times article for aiding the Ukrainians, which we all knew. I mean, of course, Twitter took me down for a couple of days because I said that CIA and MI6 was responsible for damaging that last ship in the Black Sea. But
Elon Musk is free speech on Twitter. No one gets banned for free speach anymore.
Yeah, right.
Hello, what are you talking about?
Well, it was only a couple of days, and then it was all right. But that one never showed up again. But it's right again.
The spy war, how the CIA secretly helps Ukraine to fight Putin, and it was 10,000 words. It's not a small thing from the New York Times. It's a main feature. Lots of interviews, lots of adverts. I don't know if anybody... Go ahead, Billy Bob.
Well, what clip do you have here? Is this...
we'll do that when we go back to Zelensky. Okay. It's not related to the spy things, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to just go back to the death tolls. And I mean, not only did he just say that 31,000 Ukrainians, which is a very low number, very small number, he said that 180,000 Russians have been killed, right? So they're really kicking Russia's ass. Like,
absolutely. So send more money.
What's that ratio? That's like a 6-to-1. Like six Russians to every Ukrainian, which is weird because when you look at the news and all the reports coming from the West, there's a lot of doom and gloom. But I think last week there was more doom and gloom. This week, when I'm browsing the headlines that you compiled for us, Ben, it looks like they're trying to shake off that doom and gloom, and they're really trying to promote this. We're going to do it.
That's the desperation that comes from Paris. But I do want to stick, if we can, a little bit with this whole CIA thing, because it's a 10,000 word article, lots of interviews. couple of things were in there that even as 2014, as early as the Maidan revolution, and these guys came in, the Azovite bastards, and the first people they called were the MI6 and the CIA local heads to organize their things. Basically, the CIA is bragging, we control this thing from 2014. We didn't really like this, but they also killed, the two DPR commanders, Gibi and Motorola are their call signs. I'm not sure about their real names. That was in there, and the CIA apparently didn't like that. And then, immediately they had these, 12 bases on the Eastern Front. So right. I have some thoughts on why would this appear right now? What sort of wind is blowing here? But I wanted to get your views on this thing first before we get to Paris and the whole collective West's abandonment fears that they have right now. What do you guys think?
I think Seymour Hersh was hired as the managing editor of the New York Times. I don't know. I don't have any insights into the 12 bases, CIA basis didn't surprise me because, as Doug Valentine has pointed out quite in great detail, the CIA has been in Ukraine since end of World War II.
Oh yeah, that's the main thing. Way earlier than 2014.
Way earlier. So those forward bases have probably been there while Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union. Ironically,
maybe.
Probably.
Ian, you want to share some thoughts on the?
I wrote about it yesterday on the blog at readingjunkie.com, and there were some things that stuck out to me. I mean, like Carlos said, it's been going on since World War II, but it's kind of I was a little surprised that these CIA sources would be so forward with admitting that they were participating in lethal operations and actually killing people. In stealing, Russian hardware to de-encrypt it and reverse engineer it, and because I don't know if you remember that there was part of the Russiagate hysteria, that Putin was putting bounties on American soldiers in Afghanistan, and of course there was no evidence for that claim, but it was like Lindsey Graham and those other war hawks were treating it like it is an act of war, and we need to retaliate, but this is which predated that Afghanistan history. The CIA was in Ukraine doing these lethal operations on Russian targets, and I did not see anywhere in the article that outright admitted it, but it did seem like that those included cross-border incursions into the internationally recognized borders of Russia itself.
Yeah, true. And Budanov was kind of singled out as a part of this.
He's being groomed for big things even back then, yes.
Yeah. So I didn't find it surprising, to learn that that's true. But yeah, the timing is interesting. Like, why are they running with this story now? That's the question. Like, maybe they just can't help but tell on themselves. I remember right after, like a month after they rigged the election and got Boris Yeltsin a second term, they bragged about it in Time magazine. There was a huge article.
Our guy in Moscow or something like that.
Who knows what is behind that article?
I think there's a cross faction infighting happening here, which we've talked about.
That's possible
before.
Too.
Because the right wing conservatives, Republican Party have kind of mostly washed their hands of Ukraine. They love it. They love supporting Israel, of course, but they've washed their hands of Ukraine. They're even the ones who kind of supported it to begin with. Were like, that horse is beaten to death. Let's move on. I think the military camp, the Pentagon, has mostly washed their hands of it. And I think also our military guys do not want to get into open warfare with Russia. But the civilian entities, the CIA, the State's Department, are just as gung-ho about. And the Democratic Party are all as gung-ho about it as ever. So you see this tug of war. I think it's a tug of war. And some of that includes different sides spitting this stuff out to the press to try to sway public opinion one way or the other. I think that's what we're seeing here.
I'd love to see what's going on, the interdepartmental fights. Someone's not getting along with someone, because this also tells to Trump, who, if he becomes president, we did this while you were president. You can't change a goddamn thing. Even though it started under Obama 2014, can just do this. You're not the main thing here. But one thing, it laid to rest forever. No one can ever fucking say the trope that it was an what do you call it? Unjustified evil aggression.
Unprovoked
aggression, because that is dead. I think that's a dead.
They'll still say that. They'll still tell all the lies. Just. I want to say something. I don't. Ian jogged my memory about Afghanistan, and I want to say something that has infuriated me for decades. And that is, I was watching Chinese TV because it's so much better than their news is so much better than anything I can get on this stupid thing, other than YouTube. And there were women complaining about a women's group complaining about the sexism in Afghanistan, the Taliban, right? Well, I want to tell those women, those ignorant, stupid people, that when Najibullah and his predecessor, I can never remember his name, Najibullah and his predecessor were in power under the Soviets, women's rights were right at the top of the agenda.
Yeah.
And then what did they do with Najibullah? They threw him out of office. 4 years later, they slaughtered him in the streets. The CIA Mujahideen cut him to ribbons in the streets. And this guy was, along with the Soviets, was for women's rights, heavily for them.
Yeah.
And they kept chipping away until there was, and this is with U.S. support, folks, U.S. support, that chipping away at women's rights, the women's rights agenda, until when Najibullah was thrown out of office, they were almost non-existent. And then, to put the icing on the cake, like I said, they cut him to ribbons in the streets. The Mujahideen,
literally.
the CIA's great feminist Mujahideen.
Isn't it fantastic how they do that? They never,
Jesus.
like these NGOs, they never do this about Saudi women. They say Iranian, it's all about the liberation of Iranian women or the liberation of Afghan women.
even
Like
The
the
Yeah.
targets.
human rights industry. It's a human rights industry, and it's got a purpose. It has a particular function.
Nothing to do with the women's liberation struggle,
Nothing.
emancipation
Or human
struggle that the Soviets stood for. Absolutely.
No,
I want to do a big picture. Go ahead, Ian.
Yes, but before we move on from Afghanistan, I'll bring up Bachabazi. See what anybody here know Bachabazi? This is the ritualistic rape of young boys. That was outlawed under the socialist government in Afghanistan. The Taliban has outlawed it. It's the people who practice Bachabazi are our allies in Afghanistan, the Northern Alliance, and then the warlords under the Afghan puppet government openly practiced it. We had
Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. That he was the Northern Alliance leader at the time. Scumbag.
So of course, the pro-socialist government in Afghanistan, and just like there was pro-socialist governments all over the Middle East, all over the world, they always come under attack. And so the West, to attack them, utilizes the most intolerant, usually extremist religious folks, because there's an incompatibility there between socialism and this attitude of multiculturalism and allowing equality of the sexes and of the races and of religions, like religious freedom. So their best allies have always been the ISIS, the intolerant jihadis. And they've promoted that. They've promoted that ideology all throughout, ever since, even after World War I, that intolerant Wahhabi ideology has been promoted by the West because it's a good weapon against, socialism and against progress, really.
To dovetail on that, it's not really about socialism, but people who stand up to the rules-based order. Because the last place, I know this from Richie Medhurst, who has relatives there and lived there, where not just different religions like Jews, Arab Muslims, Christians live together, is Syria. And also where the first lady, she's gorgeous, by the way, she only wears a hijab when going on diplomatic missions to countries that are more strict. It's the last worldly place, which they tried to destroy. And we just had a big, apparently, revelation from the OPCW that, that chemical attack way back in 2015, 2015. Help me out. Well, that was ISIL.
I want to say it was 2015, 2014, right around there. Yes. It was done by ISIS, not.
I mean, it's huge. It didn't get any attention. It's got a little press thing from.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the one that Aaron Mate did a lot of great work on forever.
Yes.
I forget exactly which chemical attack that was, because there was a few.
Because there were two.
This is not the Duma one. This is the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so white helmets were there for both. Cameras rolling. By some huge wonky donkey coincidence.
But CNN is still, the Assad's
gases
people in Syria. They're still saying it.
Yep. It doesn't change them at all. And there's no shame, even when it's debunked. There's zero shame or consequences.
So that's the other thing I was going to say about big picture. So the strategy of the Western, imperialists going forward was to, break up Syria, and then that'll open the way to destroy Lebanon and Iran. So they really were hoping to destroy Syria. And then also at the same time, they were going to utilize Ukraine to threaten Russia. And they wanted to break up Russia. They wanted to balkanize Russia and, break it into a million pieces like they did Yugoslavia. So who stopped these strategies? Like these were heavily invested strategies that the West had agreed upon. And who stopped them? Like, number one, Putin stopped them in both Ukraine and Syria, but also, of course, the Syrian Arab Army, Iran, Hezbollah. So they all kept Syria from disintegrating. The U.S. still occupies a third of Syria, but that's going to come to an end pretty quick. But
which is larger than occupied Ukraine.
What's that?
Sorry. Which the occupied part of Syria, occupied by the U.S., is larger than occupied Ukraine, the 4 Russian oblasts.
That's an interesting fact, and I'm sure that's
no one ever
true.
talks about it.
But, imagine how angry the West is at Putin for thwarting these grand strategies. So they really, really hate this guy. And, are they going to be able to just take the L? I hope, because that's going to be best for humanity. We'll find out,
We'll find out how stupidly desperate they got. But I have a feeling, I think I know Ian might not fully agree with me on this, but they've already lost. In Ukraine, it's definitely a loss. That's what I see when this desperation of the tourists, which you can bring on screen if you like, this weekend, who headed over to Kiev, led by Ursula, the Wicked Witch. There's, I think, De Croo, the Belgian prime minister, or something like that, who also leads the European Parliament, Meloni, the Italian, and of course, everybody's favorite, Trudeau from Canada. And all of these...
For anyone curious, that wall says the wall of memorials to killed of the Russian-Ukraine war. That's what the wall says. That's what it says.
What they're doing is they do PR, and everybody knows these guys. They got a permission from Vladimir Putin to fly in. You are guaranteed your safety. You're not going to be droned, but yet they still do shit like this girl. This is a cool meme they made about it, because the German title was Baerbock has to run away, from there was a Russian drone in the air and everything. But all of these guys, I'm going to scroll back for a second. Belgium does, Italy does, Canada does, so does Sweden, the UK, and I think Germany have these the bilateral security agreements that aren't worth the bloody. It started with the UK with Rishi Sunak, aren't worth the paper they're on. But basically, it's a huge panic, I think, because this is supposed to show Putin, you can't just win. That's what the Paris, which was the other day on Monday, the Paris Support for Ukraine Summit was all about. All the headlines were, we are going to dispel this feeling of doom and gloom, and we are going to show that Russia cannot win because Europe needs that. And all of this, the shared, unified West that these guys pumped. Just to hark back quickly to Billy Bob's story, one thing this idiot who is Baerbock, Miss 360, said, the first thing that actually makes sense to me is that Hamas would not have attacked Israel were it not for the special military operation in Ukraine. I think for the first time in her life, not by her reasoning, but she's accidentally right there, because it all had to come to a showdown between NATO and Russia first. And then they gathered for this shit where Prime Minister Fico said it's all about getting troops there, unlimited escalation. And then Mr. Peskov of the Kremlin said, if you actually send your troops, you will be at war with Russia. It's inevitable. That was yesterday. And today, all of the headlines are one country after the other, starting with Slovakia, then Hungary, then Sweden, then Poland, saying, oh, no. Even Germany, we're not going to send troops. No troops. And the US was one saying, we're not going to send large numbers of troops because we already have our little helpers there and stuff like that. So they can't just say no troops. But NATO has flipped. Actual thing to say is 180 degrees overnight. I've never seen that before, you know. Yesterday we're going to project unity because we are, by GDP, we're 15 times bigger than Russia. No way we can lose.
Mm-hmm.
And then Russia warned them and they said, oh, sorry. Okay, well, we didn't mean it. It's okay.
Billy Bob, what evidence do you have that the Americans are going, U.S. is going to leave the third of Syria that they're holding? And give up all that oil and wheat.
Just rumors. You know, it's untenable. Their position there is untenable, and they don't have enough troops there to really, you know, successfully defend themselves if push comes to shove. So I just think it's inevitable that they're going to leave, and I think they're going to leave sooner rather than later. But I can't really justify that. I mean, that's just my. I can't really give you an explanation of exactly how it's going to play out. But I think because they're vulnerable, and you know, as a safety measure, they're just going to cut their losses. I mean, the whole Middle East is. I don't think they want a wider war. And if they wanted a wider war and they got a wider war, I mean, those troops in Syria would not survive.
No, they'd be toast. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Same goes for Iraq. Yeah, they were those rumors. Go ahead, Carlos.
I think
go ahead, Ian.
I think the problem is that sooner or later, if you keep throwing drones at American bases like they have been doing, and they got lucky once with those 3 people who were killed. My guess, it's a wild guess. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think what's going to happen sooner or later is you'll have a mass casualty event like the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing. That was a huge disaster. And, you know, all you have to do is get lucky once, hit a barracks filled with people, something like that happens. And I think when you get high double or triple casualty counts, it gets really hard to justify to American voters. Why do we still have these guys as sitting ducks in Syria where no one wants us there?
Yeah. And that's just American voters.
243 Americans.
Yes.
That's a lot.
What did Reagan do in response?
I think he pulled them out. He pulled out.
He got the fuck out of Lebanon.
He just got the fuck out of Lebanon, right?
Like the Koch brothers got out of, what do you call her? Nikki Haley.
Haley, right. Well, you know, you got to stop calling it the Koch brothers because there's only two of the 4 Koch brothers that are actually involved in politics, and that was David and Charles. And I just looked it up last night so I get it right. I think it's David that died from cancer, and the other 2 brothers are not involved in politics. In fact, there's William. He lives in New York, and he's an art connoisseur, and he's gay, and he's very hostile toward his brothers. And I read a book about them growing up, and they were just bastards. Not William, but the other 3. They were just privileged.
And now it's more like the Koch brother. That's
foundation. No, I loved those headlines. I loved those headlines, though. Like, you know, all those liberal-leaning outlets. Oh, the Koch brothers don't support our girl Nikki Haley. Like, oh no, this billionaire brand does not support our golden girl anymore. Our controlled opposition candidate against, you know. No.
hey, since we're talking about elections, we could cover like the upcoming elections. We've had elections in Pakistan. And the PTI showed its strength parliamentary elections. And it's backing of Imran Khan. We had the election in El Salvador, which brought Bukele to power. And he gave a talk, which I watched before CPAC. And his talk was, I think, right after Milei's talk, the new president of Argentina, who's getting a lesson in being president from the IMF and
Yes,
his own people. He's like already caught in the middle. Uh, uh,
and the
those
regional governors.
yeah, regional governments voting that ninny in, and soon we have elections in Poland and Russia. So we got a lot of elections coming up. I think the Russian election, I put my money. I got bad odds, but I put my money on this guy that rides around on horses without shirts, without a shirt on.
I don't think there's any doubt he's going to be
Yeah,
president.
that
Yeah.
one is a lock.
You know, I'm a KPRF guy, but even I'd say Putin's almost guaranteed. 87 or 89% favorability.
Anybody?
One of those.
Anybody want to comment on any of the
Well,
others?
you said a lot. I mean, I agree that Pakistan, Imran Khan's party did very well, but he's still under arrest, right? He's
Yeah.
still under
Yeah.
arrest in prison, which is just a total disgrace. I mean, it just shows how the United States owns that government. They own the military, just like they own the Egyptian military,
Yes.
and they just can control it. It's not a democracy. And you know, you want Pakistan, you want the people of Pakistan to come to, you know, have sovereignty, to have ownership of their country and determine their own leaders, but that's not an option for them due to Western imperialism. Same thing is true in Egypt. So I wasn't familiar with the guy that you mentioned in El Salvador.
Bukele.
Is he
Bukele,
more of a
yeah.
leftist?
Yeah.
He's not so far in that. He
No,
definitely.
he's not. No,
He's not. He definitely cleaned up his country's gangs, basically. A lot of crime went down to almost zero. And he had another speech that I only sort of browsed the transcript of. It's the dollar is going to die, and with it, the Western way of the world, which was very interesting from this guy who got, like, with a huge margin, got reelected recently.
Well,
Was it a warning or was it a this is good?
It's like stated as a fact, and yeah, he might not be a left winger, but he definitely is an independent from America kind of guy.
Well,
Okay.
CPAC, the speech he gave before CPAC, that's a very conservative group of people.
Yeah,
And
this
at
one of the
first they-
states stands for conservative, I think.
They were howling applause because he's built a 66,000 a man prison, and he's put
Okay.
virtually every MS-13 gang member in
Was-
prison for life, no possibility of parole. How they're financing that little country like El Salvador, I don't know. Okay, so CPAC is conservative. And he got a rousing applause at the beginning, but then he began to say things like, and we have to rely on the people. And CPAC is just full of wealthy people. So it's like the applause started to die down. And Rosie and I both agreed that there looked like disappointment in his face that he was not getting applause for his positions, which he should have known going to CPAC that they were all a bunch of right wingers.
Well, what do you think will happen? Will his position change to please the rich white people? Probably. I mean,
Well, there's
you know
also
what?
the art of
hold his
compromise exists, you know.
He already went from 107 murders per 100,000 people down to 2 per 100,000.
Thank you for contextualizing. As I
And
said,
that-
huge.
And I think that was like really at the top, and he went all the way. Now they're number one in lacking murders in that country. And now I know some Salvadorans here, and in fact, I went over my daughter's house, and my son. This is anecdotal. My son-in-law is a contractor, and he had some of his workers down in the basement because I have a pool table down there. And I went down to talk to him, and they said, "What do you think of Bukele?" And I said, "Well, what do you guys think?" And they said, "We love him because we're hearing back from our people in El Salvador, our families in El Salvador, that they can walk the streets at night. They're not being extorted when they set up stands to sell stuff, and you know they're delighted, and I can't really fault that. There's a kind of authoritarian tinge to it because there's no due process, but I don't know how many people are in El Salvador now, 5 million, 5.3 million, something like that. But if you lock up 70,000 people and the rest of the population, the other 5 million, feel like they've been liberated from this nightmare, you you can't, you can't fault that.
I think
The
that's
other,
another
That's
reason
for the
Duterte
people.
was appreciated in the Philippines too.
Yeah.
Well, and I
yeah,
think
right,
that's
that's true.
I mean,
Authoritarian.
anti-commie, very famously, and very pro-China. That was Duterte, before Marcos Jr.
Yeah, I don't know if anti-communism played much of a role in his leadership. He was anti the drug traffickers, and he was
Yeah.
definitely anti the Western-backed Islamic, extremists, because they had a lot of gun battles in one town that the Islamists took over. But
Is this the Philippines?
Ian, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was gonna say yes. Philippines, Duarte, Philippines. I was gonna say, it's him in the Philippines or El Salvador. I think, and I read these bleeding hearts liberals and like CNN. They're like, oh well, they shoot people and they're so mean. They're authoritarian. It's like I don't think they understand how bad it is to live in a neighborhood that's ruled by a drug gang. How terrible that is for the average person. And if the government just rolls in, shoots a couple of them, puts the rest of them in jail, those people are happy. They're extremely happy. They're like, we love this government. And it's just like, how divorced from reality do you have to be to not understand how it feels to be a common person in one of those neighborhoods? It's incredible.
Yeah, and one of the things that I despise is some of the Haiti gangs, not gangs, but youth groups that formed under Aristide were compared to the Salvadoran gangs back in the day. I want to say something about the Philippines too. That goes back to the Hucks and Mindanao. There's an island in the Philippine archipelago that's all Muslim, well, majority Muslim, and it's been in revolt for decades. And under Ed Lansdale, the CIA spook, he put in Magsaysay, and they went after the Muslims, and they in Mindanao, and they pretty much, I think it's Mindanao, they pretty much pacified them or wiped them out basically as an entity. But they've made comebacks. They were called the Hucks, it's got a longer name, but the short term is for them the Hucks, and that this is a remnant of the Hucks that's constantly in conflict with Manila. So
Yeah,
it's got a long history.
Yeah.
I had some thoughts that take me to Vladimir Putin's Russia, but I don't know if you've noticed, because this is more of communist politics, Billy Bob, that the international Marxist tendency, Alan Wood's Trotskyist gang, the local variant in America, who are called the RevComs, Revolutionary Communists or something, they launched a party with the red flags and all that. All I could think of, these assholes are going to be a purist idiots, and they're probably going to be neocons in 20 years. But a lot of people are going to say, oh, amazing, like the PSL. And what these people and the Maoists do is, the Philippines are fighting. There's some bicolor revolutionary groups in the Philippines who are fighting the great struggle. That's what the Maoists say. They were the same about Rojava. They were the same about the kibbutzim, in Israel, thinking they're the real, these idiots. And something they have to learn that I've, I guess, changed my view on is that the anti-imperialist force in the world is not pure. It's not Marxist-Leninist as it was in the 1930s. It's not. You cannot count Iran like that, who say, not capitalism, not communism, but Allah. I don't think you could call that a liberal regime by any way, but it is highly popular. And they do, the nationalization policies, they do things that are great for the people. And it's a good alliance to have, especially in the Middle East. Whereas Israel is not. And I really love that Russia and Israel have pretty much fucking divorced these last couple of weeks from the stuff that I've read between their UN representatives at also higher levels, from Maria Zakharova, who met some Palestinians at the multipolarity conference that took place in Moscow recently. You may have gone, Ian. I don't know. Jackson Hinkle was there. Haz al-Din. I know Carlo doesn't love him. They were there. as well as Muslim scholars, which is I think kind of new for Russia. That's my 10 cents. Is a lot of communists say right now, because of the Z war, they say everything that Putin says is beautiful and directed towards communism, and the other people say he's still this reactionary anti-commie, and I don't think they understand that while the direction in the world is, because of the Communist Party, moving in the direction of relaunching old alliances with Venezuela, with Cuba, with the traditional forces, also with Iran, he is a very talented manager. And yes, there is a force of the KPRF who he has to get along with, and they might be, all the things the commies said about the West, yeah, they are coming true, and maybe he's having second thoughts, but he still has to say that because there are other forces in Russia, and what his job is to unite them. So I just, this whole purity test that Western Maoists, and especially dirty fucking trots, I will never tire of saying that, is folly and never leads anywhere.
So, I mean, that's a very important point, and I would like to follow up on it. I mean, that's really the legitimate criticism of, Marxist, communist, socialist, Western Marxist, communist, socialist. It's like, their communism is always co-opted and used against the enemies of imperialism. And that's the legitimate criticism of these folks, So what are some examples? What are some examples of so China. So Western communists hate China. China is not pure enough for them. China tolerates billionaires,
bourgeois capitalist.
Yeah. So and they're oppressive. And so Western communists oppose China, and they champion these imperialist narratives of genocide in Xinjiang province, right? That's a talking point that Western communists, echo. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's one, and also in Russia, it's the same thing. It's like, well, they're totally opposed to Russia, and they're on the side of Ukraine, and they parrot, imperialist narratives in that, situation as well. Same with Syria. They were anti-Assad. They're like, no, freedom. We're with the freedom fighters. They're fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The worst, one of the worst, after I think maybe the Miami Cubans, is the Syrian expats, the anti-Assad Syrian expats. I don't know if you've come across them. I've only on social media.
So these Western communists, they're anti-Iran. So a lot of them anti-Venezuela. Some of them are even anti-Cuba, but definitely anti-Syria, anti-Russia, anti-China. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're allowing communism, like you're giving us a bad name with your bullshit. But it's actually probably a majority of self-identified communists take these lines in the West, and it's disgusting.
Whereas every communist party, organized proper communist party in the world, supports Russia, and they also support China, and pretty much also Gaza.
Except for the stupid Greeks.
As in Palestine. Yes, the KKA is something different. Ian, you had...
yes, I have a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about. The gatekeeping purity test. I mean, it was probably about an hour ago, even right before this show. I was talking to this left-leaning guy on Facebook, an American left-leaning guy on Facebook. And he's all like, well, Russia is anti-LGBT. He brought up, the LGBT propaganda law and all that. And it's just like, and, it's like pointless to explain it to him, because it's like, yes, it's true. You can't just go out onto the street and have a pride parade. That's true. But conversely, you can't go out, like if you're maybe a hardcore Orthodox guy, you can't just go out into the street and have an anti-abortion protest without a license. It goes, which was when you can't even try to explain it to these people. It goes both ways. It affects both sides equally when it comes to those protests. And also, and just the problem that's gatekeeping is because they always say, because you're never going to get an Iranian guy or a Syrian guy or a Palestinian guy to agree with you about gay rights, about gay marriage or LGBT. You're never going to get those people. So you're just like, oh, well, if you don't agree with me on every single issue, you're my enemy. Just means no one in the international community is ever going to be aligned with you. And at the same time, though, they will quite happily align themselves with actual fascists, like in Ukraine, because, and those Ukrainian right sector are not stupids. They see which way the weather vane is blowing the west. So all they have to do is say, oh, yes. We like gay marriage. We want to we like weed. Like I know that unfortunately gets left, American left is very excited. If you just say, oh, I like weed, we want weed to be legal, that would be like, oh yeah, Ukrainians going to legalize weed. You can just go to Kyiv and smoke weed with them. And, it's so they'll ally themselves with actual Nazis. As long as those Nazis know which buttons to press, which social issues they should express the right opinion on. But then people who agree with you on 99% of everything, if he doesn't agree with you on weed or gay marriage, then just like, oh, no, he's my enemy. I hate him. So I think that's exactly what Billy Bob was talking about with this gatekeeping and purity tests. It always ends up with the establishment, because the establishment is manipulating those issues to begin with to make sure your own elements are always against the opposition.
Division. It's very divisive, and it's all about creating these divisions, keeping unity from being achieved, and that's it.
I mean, it's like Caleb Maupin explained it. It's kindergarten.
Comrade Ian is so close to professing Joseph Stalin as his Lord and Savior.
Oh, I already did. He's a cool guy.
He is.
Sorry, Ben, I interrupted.
As opposed to creating alliances, and when the circumstances shift, our alliances shift with them. That is from Lenin, by the way. And these kindergarten communists, what they see is, I saw this. Yes, it is. It is kindergarten. They see something and they say that's reactionary, that's communist. And they look at, for instance, the farmers in Poland, and they ask themselves, are they communist? Do I see a red flag? Doesn't fucking matter. They're the people in revolt against Brussels and against Ukraine. Those are the people you side with, try to get with, as opposed to, oh, they're not? Then fuck them. Let's put a swastika flag there. Mr. Trudeau knows all about this, I think, from the Canadian truckers. And then they're all scum. That's it. Done. I thought I'd make that differentiation, but we can get back to foreign policy, because I think Carlos, we're doing something to him.
I'm laughing, but it's great. Okay. But I wanted to say one thing that really, this is apropos, I think, of what we're talking about.
All of this is apropos.
I was watching to prepare for this show, and I came across the equivocators, and I hate the equivocators. I was watching one guy, I can't remember who it was, and I turned him off, and I turned on Reportify with the guy there, and he had a guest.
He's in China, right? That guy.
They got a message from a viewer, and he said he basically was hostile toward them, and he said, "You guys hate America, and it's driving you crazy." So their defense was, we love America, we're the patriots, and I'm sitting there thinking, don't be an equivocator, be like me. I hate America, I hate it, and I have a context for it. They've murdered millions of people, and yes, it's driven me crazy.
Yeah.
That's the only human answer you can give to that. Give me a fucking break. And these fucking
this is
idiots.
An interesting.
I'm a patriot, and I have to say, people I love to listen to and shower me with facts I don't know. They say the same goddamn thing, and it just makes my blood boil. Yeah. These are fucking murderers, man. Seymour Hersh is working on a documentary on My Lai again. And he said with the new information that's come out, even he is shocked by the brutality of it. And I did a deep study of My Lai. And in what I did, going through the documentation that was available at the time, was there were 3 levels of the high command in helicopters above My Lai, instructing these grunts to go out and kill everybody, just murder the women and children, shoot the livestock. And who gets blamed for it? Cowley, Lieutenant Cowley, this little nothing.
The scapegoat.
And it just, it makes my blood boil when you equivocate with this kind of mass killing that's been going on my entire life. Fuck.
So, Carlo, in response to that, I would offer a few thoughts.
Hold Heart
how do
medication,
we?
I know.
What?
No, we're not.
I'm kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead, Billy Bob.
I was going to say, how do we define America? Because I am with you 1,000%. If we define America as the oligarchic government that has been, in charge really since the founding of this country. I mean, I'm okay, if that's our definition of America. But, I could say I love this country and I want better for it, right? I love this country and I want it to overthrow these fucking criminal psychopaths and put in a fucking party of the people, right? Like that's what I want. I love my country and I want it to be way, way better. So I also do hate the fucking oligarchy, but I'm not gonna, shower them with this. I'm not gonna pretend they are the country because they're just a fucking transient oligarchy that's happened to be squatting in the government of my country for the past couple hundred years. But they can go fuck off.
I realize.
Okay.
I realize all that, but I'm powerless to do anything about it. And all my life I've been powerless.
I feel
and
that
you bring
too.
up the founding fathers. You're absolutely right. We have this Constitution, right? It's toilet paper. It was written by white property white men.
And they don't fucking abide by it if it's not in their financial interest. They don't even fucking care about it if it doesn't benefit them.
Yeah, but most of them own slaves. And if they didn't own slaves, they had indentured servants or just servants around. They were wealthy people, by and large. Yeah. And what it's a legalistic document that skirts around morality. And what's behind what I want to look at is morality. I don't want to look at a piece of paper and with these articles on it. It's bullshit to me. That's all horseshit.
It's
because, like you say, it doesn't have any. They can manipulate it any way they want.
Exactly.
Look at the fucking Supreme Court we have. I mean, it's basically right wing and it's papist. It's Catholics. I was brought up Catholic. I know what a wretched fucking religion that is. It's awful. It's a nightmare.
Okay,
and,
let's not shift that topic.
Let's hear Ben's response. Ben,
I actually wanted to bring Ian in because everybody pretty much at that time was slave owning and rich scumbag. There was inequalities in European feudalism as well. But what I would say is I also hate all the organs of power that the oligarchy in the US has. But I can't hate the US because then I'd hate all the three of you, for example. And I think because Russia has now completely divorced from West, that includes the US, they always make this differentiation. We don't have enemy nations, we have enemy governments. And I don't think even Russia hates American people at this point. After all that's happened, but, Ian's ready to, I think, correct me on that if I'm wrong. But I just don't like that sort of,
I'd say 3 years ago, I visited Russia for the first time. I was, pretty angry about everything. I was pretty angry at America and just everything. I was very, very angry person in general. I said I'm still an angry person, but I'm a lot less angry. And I would say just spending time in Russia and talking to Russian people made me less angry. And my first impression was just that Russians don't sit around hating America all day, which was amazing to me because we have all this propaganda. We have every other movie is about this existential threat in the Cold War, and there's just no equivalent of that. People don't sit around all day hating us in Russia. And as you get to talk to them more, my personal grievances feel very small in comparison. Because if you talk to any Russian person older than 40, basically anyone older than 40 will have some horror story to share with you. They'll be like, because, it's just like the 1990s. So, it's like, okay, my dad was working at a factory that shut down. Okay. And then we were wondering where food was going to come from. All the banks just pretty much just said, particularly, the government controlled banks all pretty much just said, hey, your savings account is gone.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing we can do about it. Fuck you, basically. And so they went through all that. So it's kind of made all my personal grievances feel very small in comparison, but they're not sitting around all day being angry about it either. I mean, I'd say the average Russian.
What's the general attitude towards Americans in Russia? What would you say it is?
They don't hate us at all. They don't hate us as individually. I mean, they're very unhappy with how the government acts, but
So
they
am
don't
I.
hate Americans or American culture. They don't hate. They like when Tucker Carlson showed up to Moscow. They were very entertained because Tucker Carlson's a very stereotypical American. Like they tell me, his face is very like even just like their stereotype of what an American looks like. He matches exactly. So he's just this very stereotypical American going to McDonald's and like marveling that Moscow has electricity. Like, oh, Moscow! I didn't know Moscow has electricity. You know, kind of, you know, it's just they find it kind of entertaining, you know. So they don't hate us. They just find that, you know, they have these stereotypes of what Americans are like. So it's entertaining to them to meet an American, and it's interesting to talk to Americans. They don't sit around hating us. Definitely not. So,
but you know what? Scott Ritter he has some good insights into the Russian people
Yes, he does.
and how you have to accept the differences. Now, when I was in Moscow, it was 1988, and I was at the nadir. I mean, I close to the nadir of their economic woes and that sort of thing. And people were really open, and they wanted to know about American culture. And I was like absolutely the wrong person to ask because they didn't want to hear my pessimism and my anger at the United States. And I would be walking down the street. Rosalie can attest to this. And people would come up to me. Maybe it was my looks, and they old people, pensioners, and they would grasp both of my hands, and they would look me right in the eyes, and they would go on give me this speech. They must have sensed I was from somewhere else, and I couldn't understand the Russian, but there were like tears in their eyes. There was like a desperation, and there were people sitting. There were old women sitting on blankets in the street, selling a few trinkets and that sort of thing. And we went to Ismaila, which is this enormous uh, flea market, and it goes on for miles. It wends through like this kind of forest and parkland, and past millions of people. But I tell you, I went up to a guy who was selling carpets, and he knew I wasn't Russian, and we started to like play like boxing, and he was laughing, and we hugged each other. We didn't know each other from Adam, and he didn't even know where I
The
was from.
language.
It was just a great experience for me. I love the people. I mean, I absolutely loved them. We went to visit an artist co-op, and they went out and they bought a cake. I mean, for them to buy a cake for us coming, it must have been a huge financial strain.
In 1988, it was huge.
Where it was the people I was staying with, it was the former apartment of a general. It was a gorgeous apartment, and there were rubles laying all over the place. They just had stacks of money. So when we left in the morning to just Rosie and I go explore the Mayakovsky Museum, get on the subway. We get on the subway. There was always somebody that spoke English to tell us where the fuck we were at. And they were just so open. I mean, it's beautiful. I agree with Scott. You know, it was beautiful. At that nadir, at that point when the U.S. had absolutely destroyed their country and was picking it, I was staying with somebody that was a lawyer that was helping pick apart Russia.
Yeah.
We were staying with him. And it was like, man.
Well, those poor people, they were offered the lie that, you know, peaceful coexistence was an option. And they were so desirous of this lie that the West was selling them that, hey, let's all just be friends. You maintain your sovereignty. We're going to just, you know, peace through mutual prosperity. And you can, you know, embrace our culture, our music exports, our Hollywood exports, and you can have your sovereignty. And it'll be beautiful, you know, and that was a fucking lie. It was a fucking lie.
But
And
still,
Yeltsin
that story was beautiful.
We're too naive to understand that, you know, peaceful coexistence wasn't in the cards. But Putin's figured it out.
Yeah, and I think, as Scott Ritter would say, you are beginning to know the Russian soul, or you were in 1988. I really like that story. I thought that was.
And it was and we went to the Pushkin Museum, and there was a woman who must have been in her late 80s or 90s, and she was the curator, and she took us around to each exhibit, and she spoke in Russian, and we didn't understand what she's saying, but it was so beautiful to have this. She took so much time with us. I can't tell you how impressed I was with those people. I was moved every day. Every day I would get up and I'd buy the English speaking newspaper with a cup of coffee, and Patriot's Pond was right behind the apartment building. And I would go sit at the pond and read the newspaper and watch the ducks and watch the younger women with their children playing around.
Ian, is
It was
Carlo
beautiful.
overselling it? Have you met some rude people? Are there rude people in Moscow?
There are, but it's a cultural value to be hospitable and polite
Yes.
to people. It's very, even if
Yeah.
you don't like a person, it's important to be hospitable. But I think this hospitality and when you see someone who's not from around there, you want to be polite and hospitable to that
Yeah.
person. I think that's cultural. It's true.
One more anecdote. We were walking home and we bought a cake to take home, and it was 11 rubles, which at that time was like 3 cents or something. And we didn't know the money value, so we gave them a bunch of rubles, and they said no, it's too much. They gave it back to us. Oh my God, it's like, I got to tell you, it was a great experience.
Well, this is why we love you, and I think we already voted on this once, but we should vote again that Rosalie has to get a camera because we also want to hear.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
Did she join you on that trip?
Yes, we were together. Yeah.
That's so moving. I don't even want to talk about world
She
events.
doesn't even need
anymore.
a camera. She can just move you out of the way and sit right there. No, I'm
Just get another microphone.
It looks like there's room next to you. There's room next. But
Yes.
maybe in a future show.
If you go to Moscow, please go to the Mayakovsky Museum. It's
Yes.
brilliant. I've never seen anything like it. Brilliant.
One day I will.
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
what else, guys? An hour
I
and
think it's
20
a good-
in. There's a lot of comments that I didn't throw up. I've been distracted trying to listen to everybody's contribution to the discussion, and I've been ignoring a lot of the commentary. So I apologize for that. I did get Shaniqua's hearts in with Carlo's comments earlier. So what else before we adjourn?
I think it's a good note to end it on, unless there's.
That's what I was thinking. I don't want to get back to world events after that. It was beautiful, but go ahead.
I don't know. I've got my own cheat sheet here.
Analog. You're an analog.
Well, maybe we could. No, that's not. No. Sweden.
I really did like venting my frustration on the Western left and even a lot of self-identified communists. I mean, that's a very important topic that frustrates me often on social media. I think we did a good job dissecting that.
One thing is, I was in a kibbutz with a guy who was telling his whole line was Imran Khan backs terrorism. He was a huge backer of terrorism. And I kept telling him, you're confusing Khan with the ISI, which is the Pakistani Secret Service. You can't confuse these two things. You gotta parse it out. And of course, he's getting his information from the Western media.
Do you know my first thought? I thought you were confusing it with the ICC, where the main judge is Sadiq Khan, I think, no relation to Imran Khan, the guy who issued the arrest warrant for Putin, and has issued nothing to Israel ever since. I mean, that's the ICC.
Yeah, we should get Christopher Black back on.
True.
I also want to talk to him about Being in Time, because he felt like can you imagine someone his age reading Being in Time? I mean, it's just amazing. I read it when I was like in my 20s, and I
remember
have
A Wrinkle in Time.
A simple explanation for it. But anyway, I'm spoiling the end of the show.
I'm not familiar with Being in Time. That's a novel?
No. It's a work of philosophy.
Okay.
He's a phenomenologist. He studied with Edmund Husserl, probably the main phenomenologist in philosophy.
No, we will have Chris Black back. He's an excellent host and excellent guest, and international law expert, of course. So we will definitely have him back. So we'll reconvene on Friday. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Carlo. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you on Friday.
All right.
Take care.